I appreciate you. Okay, cool. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Being Brooke. Today we have John Roman, the CEO of BattlBox, on with us. BattlBox is a subscription box for outdoor enthusiasts. John, thanks for being here. We really appreciate it. And want to go ahead and kick it off by just letting you tell us a little bit about what it is that you're working on right now.
Sure. So happy to be here, Brooke. Good to see you again. Yeah, so BattleBox is an outdoor adventure brand. We do have a subscription box element that's a big chunk of the revenue, but we, for whatever reason, don't necessarily lead with that. Just because it's just the positioning. It's interesting that that's just the move we've taken. Interesting stuff we're working on. So we did an event back in July where we took 5 customers. We sent out all of our boxes one month. We put 5 golden tickets in it. And if you got a golden ticket, very Willy Wonka style, we flew them all to San Antonio, Texas, put them, a bunch of BattleBox employees, a bunch of BattleBox vendors, about 50 people total, on a bus, 2 hours out to rural Texas. And we put the 5 customers, contestants, in a actual World War II tank, and they then shot the tank downrange at a target. And if they hit the target, we were going to give them $100,000. So that was the
Did
first
anybody
kind
hit the
of
target?
no, which was really unfortunate because unpopular opinion, we actually wanted them to hit it. We wanted to give someone the money. This was our first kind of attempt to go into this type of content, and we ended up, it was an insurance policy. So the same as a hole-in-one contest you might see at a golf charity tournament, or a halftime basketball half-court shot.
Mm-hmm.
Make the shot, win the car. Those are all insurance policies, which I didn't know, and that's what this was. So they literally had a call with us, the insurance company, and the tank operators, and they, you know, drew up some schematics of like distance, velocity, size, target, and then came up with a calculation of what they thought the odds were to hit it, and then used that to come up with a policy cost. So we had bought the policy. Um, so
Can you use it for another like event?
no, it was a one time policy. So well, of course we wanted them to hit it because it wasn't our money. We had already paid a significant amount of money for the policy. Um, so
Interesting.
lessons learned from that one. It doesn't. It's not fun when nobody wins. So like the next event is gonna be, we're just gonna give someone cash when they win instead of doing a policy. We just didn't. It was naivety and ignorance from our first go. So working on additional events and what those look like, and how do we make it bigger and better than the previous.
That makes sense. I'm curious, was it your idea or was it like a team effort, or how did you guys come up with the idea to actually do this event specifically?
So it was a combination. It really, from the initial concept to where it ended up, was just, all team members just adding value and adding ideas to it. Originally, so in January of this year, we were at SHOT Show, which is a industry specific show where a lot of our vendors are, and our CFO was walking the floor and got a pamphlet from this company that called Drive Tanks, and they were like, yeah, you can shoot our tanks and blow stuff up. And he sent it to me and was like, hey, this is a great idea for maybe content. Maybe we just go here one day and, make some cool videos. And that was the initial idea. And then we were sent, so we call our monthly boxes missions. And we were coming up in July, or in June was our 100th mission. So our 100th different box we had sent out over, 8+ years. And there was a lot of unrealistic expectations from our customers on what was going to be in the box. Like, oh, they're gonna do something crazy. It's gonna be this. It's gonna be that, and all their ideas, which are awesome, um, were extremely, like, we can't do that. We would lose millions of dollars and go out of business. Like, we can't
No.
give everybody a new car. Um, for a box you paid $200 for. We'd love to, but the economics aren't there. So we knew we had to do something cool and different. And the tank for content ended up moving into that direction, and from there, it just kind of snowballed with ideas.
Very cool. Yeah, very cool. Well, to kind of dial it back a second, I also would love to hear just a little bit about you personally and your journey into like why BattleBox? How did you end up at BattleBox? Is it, the product that what the story is that led you to being the CEO of BattleBox?
Sure. So I think so around 20 end of 2014. So my background previously was B2B sales, technology sales, and had some success with that. And there was I worked for a company that was publicly traded and got taken private, so got a little bit of a payday with shares. And at that point, I was just I'd done a moderately good job of building a network, and I leveraged that to find things I could invest in. Because ultimately, I while I'd been almost at that point, I guess like 7 8 years, working for corporate big companies, I knew I couldn't do that forever. It wasn't sustainable. I wanted to have more work life balance, and I get emotionally attached to my job, so I end up working ridiculous hours. So this was a potential way to figure that out. So I started investing in companies. And just to be clear, we're not talking like angel VC money. We're talking about, oh, I could put $3,000 into this, or I could put $10,000 into this. Um, so it wasn't, a big check that I was writing. So ended up finding in a span of about 3 months, I think six different investments. Um, Fast forward to today, 8 years later, those other five were dead within a year and a half. Just completely lost. Didn't get anything out of it. BattleBox was one that I had invested in, and the concept was I was going to offer very limited capacity, couple hours a month, more on the business growth side, trying to take my business acumen and apply that to some best practices for the business. Board seat, just very, very, very minimal expectations, and almost immediately there was major success with it. And fast forward, so we launched BattleBox in February 2015. I was owner partner involved about a week and a half, 2 weeks after launch. And then fast forward to the following year, I had moved jobs, and in January of 2016 started working for this labeled startup, but they were 10 years old. They were like, "Oh, we have this new idea and it's going to be great, so we're a startup again." And the idea was great in theory, but um it was nowhere where it needed to be. And I quickly found out, trying to sell this to call it Fortune 2000 companies, and everything they asked for we didn't have. So it was just the product was nowhere near where it needed to be. And BattleBox in the meantime was doing really, really well and demanding just as much time as my full time. And I just was at a pivotal moment. Both were the same. The revenue that the company I was working for the previous year and BattleBox's expected revenue for 2016 were about the same. And now I was assuming this continued growth
Mhm.
with BattleBox, but I had to make a decision, and the decision was, okay, I'm going to do this full time and jump into it.
How exciting. So when you make those decisions, I'm curious, is there a certain process that you have? Like, do you do that in a silo? Do you have a community, like a business community or mentors or advisors that you turn to? Is it your friends and family? Because I think there's a lot of people that have decisions like this that they're faced with in their careers, and nobody really knows. It's different for everybody. It's all I always say, context is everything. So it's so much about who you are as a person and the opportunities. So I'm curious how you made that decision, or if since then, as you've had to make more decisions like that in your career, um, who you lean on, or if it is kind of, maybe you run, maybe whatever it is that you do whenever you're faced with decisions like this to make them.
Sure. So I lost you there for a second,
Oh,
but we can all edit this all, so it'll be fine.
yeah,
So if I don't answer it right, just push back on me
I will.
afterwards. It's a really good question. So the answer from that specific question at that time and that decision versus if I was faced with that now, the answers are vastly different. So then I had a network and I was working very hard to build it, but I still don't know if I had the right people to ask and get the correct feedback to make that decision at the time. So it was a decision I made 100% myself.
Hmm.
Um, and at that point, the only um, person I kind of had to run it by was my wife. We had um, just bought a home in December 31st, 2015. So this brand new responsibility, um, among others, this was kind of a risky move. So I had to, tell her this is what I want to do. And she was supportive of it. But as far as the decision making process, it was, it was me. Now you look at, now if I'm tasked with a big decision like that, I'm definitely talking to my network. I think you have to be really careful um talking with people about decisions like that, because when someone's too close to you and is a friend, there's some bias in there, which is not malicious, and it's oftentimes positive and supportive, and in reality it's cancer and poison, because they're telling you what they're hoping for or what they think you want to hear via support, and
Hmm.
sometimes they're just not looking at the actual um problem or decision, and it's actually not beneficial at all, which is wild to say because everybody's like, oh yeah, talk to your friends. um you got to be really careful talking to your friends because they'll build you up sometimes in a way that is not healthy, because it's setting yourself up for failure later.
So today, when you're faced with a decision and you're thinking about who you're going to run it by, like peers versus mentors versus advisors, is there a certain system that you have for evaluating that, or people that you maybe keep as mentors in business only and not in friends, not as friends almost, so that you have that separation?
So I have a really big problem where I make my business partners and peers my friends. So I'm not doing myself any help there, right? So um, I think being able to identify those, let's just call them all friends, whether they're mentors, business partners, and peers, or actually just friends from something non-business related. I think y- you should be able to, at least for myself, I can look at call them all friends, and I know which ones are going to give it to me straight and direct and not care about my feelings, just be have a very adult, real conversation with me. Um, so I think I can, and there's people that I can do that to at this point that are technically in all of those different boxes. But there's also ones that I know I'm probably not going to ask, because they're going to answer as a friend, which is not going to do me any help.
That makes sense. Some cool advice that I've gotten from an advisor is actually like, if you don't value or want your life to look like theirs in a certain area, you don't take advice from them. If you value or want your life to look like theirs, so if you value the way that their finances are, or the way that their job is, or the way that their marriage is, that's probably a good person to take advice from about marriage or finances or jobs. But I think it's kind of helpful to almost subsection that of like, well, that makes a lot of sense and that type of lifestyle works for John, but where I really want my life to look like is I want to be the CEO of a company. So I'm going to listen to him maybe there, but not take advice in these other areas. And it's helped me to think of it as like looking at what the decision is and what I want the outcome to be, and then finding the people that have accomplished that outcome and looking to them for advice in those situations. And it's vast, like I found it's vastly different, the people that I go to for advice in certain areas versus other areas. And it's really helped me make those decisions. So that's just a random kind of.
I think that's a golden nugget right there. I think that's so true. I think to even add on to that, because there's so many people that you talk to that want to give advice, that like sometimes even unsolicited, and again, it's not malicious, they're trying to help.
Hmm.
But you're right, like um we have this person in our local, call it circle of people, that is constantly giving relationship advice. Like just anything go along with any relationship, they're going to give you their advice, and they are
Yeah.
so confident, and their own relationships are such a dumpster fire. Like it's just wild. But I went to that, but you're right.
Yeah. No,
Like
100%.
the
It's helped
people
me really like sift, because like you can value people as friends in so many
at
regards.
different
Not
for
listen
different
to them.
things, right?
Yeah, but understanding the bucket where you're like, okay, I'm gonna take advice from this person and that, and otherwise, my other thing, this is second, I guess, golden nugget to lead off of that I love is the how. I don't know if you've heard of like helped, hugged, or heard, but so anytime like I have a friend or a peer or anybody talking to me, and I actually repeat this back to people sometimes, my question is always, do you just want to be helped, hugged, or heard? Because I think that we often go to help. We think people want advice, but sometimes people just want to vent. Like they just want to be heard. They're actually not even asking for advice, or they just, you know what I mean, want to hug. And so I think that
That's
help, hugged, or heard thing is another really like it's been helpful in conversations that I have with people, because a lot of times the answer is heard, and then I'm like, okay, I'm not going to
so
give advice.
you literally asked the question.
I literally asked the
I
question.
I love that, because that's
Yeah.
so many times um a thing that I'm cognizant of now, because she said something with my wife, is that she would come home from work
Hmm.
and present problems, and me, human nature, I'm trying to solve them, and that's not what she's looking for at all. She just wants to be heard.
And your
um
intentions are good. Like you mean well. You
right,
think
no
that's what.
malicious intentions. I'm like trying to,
Yeah.
well, let's solve this. Have you asked him that? Like that's not what she's looking for. That's really good.
Well, then sometimes
um
it can cause, yeah, like, and I think it's really helped my relationships and my friendships, because then when the answer is heard, like sometimes if you give advice and then those people don't take that advice, they feel like they can no longer come to you and talk about that issue or that
yeah,
thing.
you don't want to, right?
Yeah, because you feel like you didn't listen. And so I think it's really helped like preserve relationships in that regard. Because then I'm like, okay, cool. Like I support you in what you do. If all you want to do is be heard, like that's your life. And then
I'm writing
there
this
they
down.
still can come back to me and talk about that. Cool. I
I'm
love it.
writing this down. This is great.
I love it. This is the stuff I love to talk about. I'll give you okay, cool. Dialing it back, unless you have anything else to say on that. The other thing I was going to ask you that day of that decision, I think it was a big decision. I mean, BattleBox, it sounds like has been a big part of your life, and I also feel I get emotionally attached to my jobs. I get emotionally attached to the people that I'm working with. My friends and business partners blend and blur together. But if there was anything, you were in these corporate jobs, which are very different than startup culture. If there was anything you could have gone back and told yourself on the day that you made the decision to go full time into BattleBox in the startup culture, and this can be like work, it can be personal, it can be anything. What advice would you have given yourself then that you think would have helped you the most throughout the journey? And take your time.
Yeah, that's a really, so the thing I go to is, it still worked out. So I don't know if it's a good answer.
But that's okay if it still worked out. It still could have been it could have been easier. It's like I think there's a lot of things in life that I always say that like with lessons, you can learn lessons the hard way or you can learn lessons from other people. So you learned probably the lesson and still it worked out, but maybe if somebody would have given you this advice, you would
Yeah.
have had to learn that lesson the hard way.
So the thing that comes to mind, and it still worked out for me, but it was definitely a lesson learned, and that was, understand and truly know your business partners. So in hindsight and looking back, um there were a lot of, um, I hate to call them red flags, but sure, red flags, not necessarily in a negative way, of just behavior of business of my business partners that um, wasn't necessarily bad. It wasn't a good fit for me and what I look for in a business partner, and it created um, frustrations later on. And if I had been cognizant, um, it I might not have done it. Which, I mean, doing it obviously worked out, but it wasn't easy. And I think that's a just truly making sure you're being realistic about your business partners. And the reality is that now at this point, I've had, in if you take all ventures, anything I've been involved with, I probably have had maybe, I don't know, 25, 30 business partners at this point. And 90%, 85, 90% of them were not good business partners. To no fault of their own. And I still maintain relationships with some of these people, friendships. They're good friends, but like finding the right business partner and making sure that it's the right business partner and it's a fit for you. It's a yin to your yang. You guys see eye to eye on most things, and if not, you at least are mature enough to know how to have the conversations to come to resolution.
Hmm.
I think is huge. And you hear so many nightmares of when partnerships don't work, right?
Hmm. Well, I think that people, and this is like my whole thing in doing this podcast, is so many people are talking about companies and products and the business aspects, which are all things that are so important. But I think that people are not looking at the people behind the products and companies enough, and the relationships that go into that with your customers, with your business partners, with, there's so much complexity to it that's just not being talked about. And it's like things that I think so many people struggle with or don't know how to do or how to evaluate. Like, I know these are things that, like, as I started to become more entrepreneurial, start some of my own ventures, like, I had been told all about like the revenue operations or the numbers or the like the CAC or the LTV or the revenue and the top line and the bottom line, but nobody's talking about how you pick a bit like a business partner or having those conversations early on. And so I had an advisor give me some of that advice. Like, he's like, this is like a marriage, you're signing a prenup, like you need the decision making tree in place before you even like decide to go into business together. How are you going to make decisions when there is a disagreement, because inherently there will be. And I think that that's really good advice to share with people, and something that is just like underrated or not talked about nearly as much. Since you've learned these lessons, how, and to your point, I think the other part that's really important to emphasize is, just because somebody's not the right business partner for you doesn't mean they're not the right business partner for somebody. It's like friendships
Right.
and relationships. It's just about like that communication style and how you work and that working together, because you wouldn't want to marry somebody who had completely core values or belief systems that were different than yours.
Exactly.
And that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with those. But so today, like, I'm guessing, and maybe I'm like leading the question here a little bit, but like for me, I know I had to almost do a lot of internal work, because before I could know what values and beliefs I was looking for in a business partner or people that I would go into a venture with, I had to know what were my core values and beliefs, because historically it was just whatever the company I was working, like, you were given the company values, you were given the beliefs, versus when you're doing this on your own or in an entrepreneurial way and you're setting those visions and values and beliefs as you're going into a company, you're going to have to know what those are for yourself. So have you done some of that introspection, or if not, like, what are the other things that you have done to better understand what it is that you're looking for in a business partner when you go into these ventures?
So I don't have a polished, answer on this. It's For me, it's so I think before it was very simple. I'm not a big drinker, but it's called like the beer test. Would you like to have a beer with this person? Basically, would you like to hang out with these people, like
Mhm.
outside of work? Um, and that goes into like the friendship relationship dynamic. Um, and I think that was initially really all I was looking for, which was obviously wrong. Because you could love to hang out with someone and they could be literally a dumpster fire match for you when it comes to business.
Mhm.
And then I think the next thing I added in was, okay, well, if they're successful in other stuff, if they're successful in their job or the other business stuff, that they have, oh, then it would be a match. So both of those. And that's not true either, right? You have
Mhm.
these people that could be wildly successful in their job career. This is maybe a side hustle to them. And because of that, it takes a lower priority, and they can't bring it up to the same priority, which is a tough ask, right? Time is such a valuable resource. So that, wasn't an end all fix all. Um, so kind of a medium, and it still doesn't get you to the right answer, was kind of in the pre-forming the business piece or deciding on business partners. um not not overtly, but giving them pieces of homework to do, without them really knowing you're giving them pieces of homework, just to see the interaction, the follow up with it, how it's presented, time turnaround. It kind of can be pretty telling. Um, and it kind of gives you maybe a sneak peek at how you guys would interact with like business decisions and business topics down the road. Um,
What
Again,
kind of homework do you
it's
give?
still not a end all be all,
Or is
but
that
but
you
there's three
you're
together, at
really
least at least gets you in maybe with certainty, a higher probability of a coin flip.
yeah. Well, I mean, and it's people and relationships that we're talking about, so I don't know that it's ever 100%, like
No, yeah, I'm just trying to get above 50% in the decision making.
yeah, which I mean, I think everybody is, and I think, like I said, some of this, it's the soft skills that are being like severely undervalued or not talked about. I always joke my superpower in corporate America is 3.5 years of therapy because I can communicate, which is like ahead of the game. And because a lot
Yeah,
of people they're coming in and they're keeping everything. I think people have almost taken the word work life balance, and I'm not saying that it's important, but too far because it's like they don't want to talk about anything personal or at work, and they don't want to talk about anything at work and at home, and just the reality is like you're the same person at both those places. And like I've listened to Steve Jobs talk. He mentions like his business partner knew when his kid was sick, and his wife knew when his business partner was sick, and that's the only way that it would have worked, because like these things have impact on you when you don't forget that your wife is sick or that your business partner, like when you walk in and out of the door. And so I think like this communication and relationships with people is so important. And yes, while work life balance is important, it's also just it's not realistic for the two to have. It's like that Apple show Severed, where they like
yeah,
sever the brain when they go. Like it's just not the way that we
yeah. As
work.
soon as they go into the elevator, boom.
Yeah, then they
So
forget.
yeah, I think you're spot on. I think, one of the interesting things. So I'm looking at team members that didn't haven't worked out on the team, and most of them, almost exclusively, it's because there was that severed piece. You couldn't connect to them as a human being, and I want to connect as a human being. Um, and by doing so, I better understand you, and I'm able to fully extrapolate your full potential, which is not a one sided thing. It's a mutually beneficial proposition. It's going to bring you up to your top performing level, and you're then going to grow professionally, which might take you on a different path where you leave to leave the company to go to a better job. And that's a totally acceptable and great outcome, right? But it's also the flip side of it, or you're just going to, do more and more of the company and be a valuable asset that's not replaceable. Um, but in order for that to happen, I have to better understand you. I have to understand the human side. I need to know, how you operate, how you function. I need to have a friendship with you,
Well,
to
and to
do
be a
that.
good coach too. I mean, a coach can't coach something that they don't know.
Can't.
Or yeah, like if you, I mean, even in sales, you have a background in sales and I have a background in sales. There's times where it's just like if somebody's wife's in the hospital, they're not going to want to talk about your software. And you have to know those things. Same thing, if somebody has something going on at home, it might make sense why for a week there is something lacking in their work or something being top of mind. But if you don't know about those things, you're just going to assume that that person doesn't have that talent or that skill. So it's like
Right.
to actually coach those people, you need to have all the facts about them. And I do think, to be fair, there's a flip side, and this is why I love startups so much. Of in corporate culture, especially larger corporate culture, those things can often be used against you. It's not encouraged to go to another company or go somewhere else. And so people
Right.
have become very guarded because of that. So I think it also is important. Like, I think it's cool that I've heard you talk about this a few different times, but I think it's cool you talk about it and you're open about it because I've been in startups where they've told me the same thing and you can tell, like, you can tell when people are genuine, that they
Right.
mean it. They're going to support you if you go somewhere else, if that's where your career takes you. But then if that's not talked about or if that's not the culture that is set, and so I think it's cool that you're thinking about this in all of your hires, you're not going to have anybody, like, you're going to create an environment where even the people that would be willing to be more open aren't going to do that because it's not going to feel like the culture. And so it's so
Right.
important to set that culture, and it seems like BattleBox has done a very good job of setting that culture, and it's something that you guys think about a lot.
100%.
Yeah. I know that we were talking about what you're working on right now around content and stuff, but I'm curious, you're entrepreneurial, and maybe the answer is it's all BattleBox, but what's next for John? Like, in terms of, you've been at BattleBox a while, are you in the long haul for staying at BattleBox? Are there other companies you've invested in, multiple companies at once before? Are you looking at investing in other companies? What are you thinking about for your next steps in life?
So BattleBox is I'm all in. It's probably about a 4.5, 5 year journey for me here. So I'm not even thinking about what's next. I've even had, so when we sold BattleBox in 2021, we had I was forced to divest from a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
Some stuff that wasn't in conflict, like, at all. I maintained and I kept buying BattleBox back. Um, I have some other stuff I work on, but actually exiting one of those, the second biggest thing this week. We have a close date set for Friday, and that way it's full attention BattleBox. So something we did when we bought it back in April, immediately, it was first order of business was create a stock employee program. So there's people that have been with us for just as long as I've been. There's people that are with us. Walter, for example, our head of marketing, he was technically an employee before I was. Um, but we have a lot of people like that. So what we wanted to do immediately was create a program where they're gonna participate in the next event.
Well,
And
congrats on whatever it is that you're exiting this week. I think it's important to say that as well.
yeah, well, thank you. It's but with this, it's because what we're going to try to accomplish in 5 years from now or 6 years from now when we sell, it's going to give, hopefully, knock on wood, life changing money to a chunk of our team. Um, I feel obligated to make sure my focus is solely on BattleBox because I want to execute for all of them. I want to just hit a home run for a bunch of people. So that's my focus. My focus is BattleBox, and we're gonna take this to the next event, which is, I'm guessing, probably 5 years from now. That gives enough time for the market to go back to where it needs to be and valuations to get to where they need to be, and it gives us time to kind of get some growth to with some compound interest on growth to kind of get to the size where the the acquisition
That's
size
so
is
cool.
decent.
Um, Mark Cuban talks a lot about this, like, stock option programs and having employees invested. I'm curious. I always joke, like, I would rather have a small piece of a larger pie than a whole pie of something that's just me. And you do have actually more experience than I do. I've mostly lived in startup land, but you have experience in large corporate companies. Like, can you see the difference between, like, how people are contributing towards the vision and doing their jobs when they have that incentive? Because I think a lot of people think that there's no point in giving that type of stuff away, and I'm just curious from, like, the non-spreadsheet numbers version, but what you see in people in a day-to-day, like, can you tell the difference that them having that incentive, of if BattleBox sells, like, they're gonna see a payday too, especially the ones that have been there in the long run. Is that prevalent in their work?
Yeah, I mean it just um the team members that received it, they're already um emotionally in blood, sweat, tears. Like they're amazing people that already care, that already have the attachment and are already doing amazing work. Um so what it does, it just fully aligns us, right? Um it's again transparency, right? Like we're trying to build this thing. We got it back. We're going to build it up and we're going to make it something great and then we're going to have someone take it over.
Yeah,
Um and it's someone that's going to take it over that's going to do it right as well. We're not just going to sell it to the highest bidder. We did, the time we sold 2 years ago, we didn't sell to the highest bidder. We sold to the person that we thought was most aligned with keeping the brand how it is. So I don't know if it's visible, people going above and beyond now that they have equity. Um, but I don't know if it would be if it would be visible because the people that received it are already going hard, right? This was just true alignment, right? They're already doing the things and whether it's a department that might be semi siloed, they're still treating it like they're in their business and they're making decisions that are the correct ones. So it just fully aligns us,
yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, maybe it's not visible to you, but I think like you see so much stuff about like, quiet quitting and, all of these. My guess is to somebody that was listening to you, it's not visible because it's what you've been engulfed in almost since the beginning, if that makes
right?
sense. But I think if anybody else hears the words that you said and the way that you described what they're giving to the company, my guess is that it is a little bit visible compared to what you're seeing in the workforce and people working multiple jobs at once, people quiet quitting, and I forget there's another funny one. They call it like lazy girl jobs or whatever else,
Right.
where people are really just clocking in and out because they're not bought into the vision and the mission. They don't feel like they have the incentive. The day that it sells, it's a corporate, okay, great, two people are going to get their payouts, but what's that going to do for me and the difference? And so, from what I heard, to me, it sounds like it is visible. It just might not be like to you, it's all you've known for BattlBox. It's the way it's
Right.
been since the beginning. But it's very cool that people are that invested in the company and that you're that invested in your people as well.
Yeah.
Um,
Thank you. The multiple job thing to me is wild. I was on a bachelor party last year and the guy we nicknamed him 3 Job Justin. Justin had 3 full-time jobs. He
mhm.
had deleted his LinkedIn. He didn't have a LinkedIn anymore. And when asked about LinkedIn, he's like, I don't do social media. Um, but he had 3 full-time jobs and good jobs. And it was just
I know
wild to me.
several people are starting to do that. I think, especially, and I mean, what I notice is the people that are doing it. It is larger corporate companies
Yeah.
that they do not feel bought into the mission and vision. There are no equity or stock options, and they're just doing it for a paycheck
Yeah.
of
They're
clocking in
just
and out.
yep. Purely
And
transactional.
definitely, I'm curious. Will you tell us the story a little bit? Like you've alluded to the fact that you sold and then rebought back BattleBox, but what happened there? What was that process like, and what ended up enticing you to buy it back?
Yeah, so selling so before I dive in, you can't time these things. You can't time markets. We timed not I mean, we got lucky, but both the sell and the buy, we sold at a high and bought at a low. So on the selling piece, I kind of had alluded a little bit to the importance of business partners. Um, so there were originally 4 partners. When I came on full time, um, I won the short straw. That my first task was to buy out a fourth partner that wasn't providing any value. So it was then down to 3 of us, and we had challenges, and it maybe wasn't the um, best fit for 3 business partners, but um, maybe I'm the problem. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the one that wasn't the good fit. But we eventually got to a point where one of the partners, he was done, not really checked in, wanted to retire, wasn't really um, bringing a lot of, um, he he was ready to retire.
He was checked.
Um, yeah, and self admittedly, like he wanted to. He's entrepreneur idea guy. Just he was done. Um, and we were in a weird spot. Okay, well, we've all agreed that at minimum, the least we're going to take is 6x multiplier off EBITDA. Okay, well, Patrick and I, so Daniel wanted to retire. Patrick and I are talking, and like, we're not, neither of us are ready to go. Like, we're loving this, and like, we feel like we're just scratching the surface of what's of potential, but it doesn't make sense for us to get a loan or borrow money to buy it at that multiplier because I mean, even if we keep it the same size and don't grow it. Because at this point, we're coming off of pandemic and Netflix shows, so like we don't know if the levels we're at are sustainable.
Mhm.
So it's not talking. We haven't figured out growth plans, so it's too much of a payback period and too much of a risk because we're not going to get that amount of money without some strings attached, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's some sort of governance board, not true control, with certainty. If we're getting the money, it's personal guarantees where we can lose everything if we're wrong. So just there's a lot of risk, and we just couldn't make it work. So that left the other option is okay, we find a buyer, and we talked to a bunch, and we had some really strong private equity offers. Ultimately, this company called Emerge out of Toronto, they were publicly traded via a SPAC. They were speaking our language and really saw the vision and painted a vision that was arguably better than ours, and we were bought in. So we sold. Daniel was able to retire. Day of transaction, he was done. Patrick and I stayed on. Richard, who was our CFO, who was paramount to us, even being in a position to sell, stayed on too. And that was it. And then just quickly, to no fault of Emerge, um, the story of SPACs over the last couple of years. It's not a good story. It's a nightmare. You don't read this story to your children at night. It's not good, right? Most lose 80-90% of their market cap. And when that happens and you have this market cap just dwindle, there's often covenants involved in that. There's EBITDA concerns. There's all kinds of things that can happen to a publicly traded company. And I didn't say anything right now that's not like public knowledge. Like
Yeah.
it was just rough for any SPACs generally, and it just simply presented an opportunity where we saw an opportunity um to take back our baby and do it in a mutually beneficial way, with a stack of cash that they wanted a stack of cash, we had a stack of cash, and got our baby back.
Very cool. Yeah, I think that's a very interesting story. And again, some of the stuff that is just not talked about as much as how those things work. So thank you for sharing that.
Never the plan. The plan was not to buy BattlBox back. The plan was stay with BattlBox for 3 years post acquisition, which would have taken us to October 2024, because there was earnout and money tied to us staying 3 years. And then it was, 2025 was going to be a new venture and a
Yeah.
new idea. And that just wasn't, that was the plan the whole time. And then it just quickly changed when we saw the opportunity.
I think that that's kind of always the case with entrepreneurship, or what I hear from the sentiment from talking to all kinds of different entrepreneurs or executives at companies is like, it's really about the journey, not the destination. Like you can plan 5 and 10 years out, but good luck. Like
Yeah.
you have to be open. It's like what we were talking about earlier, these decisions that you come up like that you're faced with, that the reason that you want mentors and advisors, like they're not easy decisions and they're not always clear decisions and it's not always obvious what's going to happen, but I'm really glad that it worked out for it sounds like it worked out for you guys.
No, it worked
Um
out beautifully. And to your point, the when we I smelled what was possibly the opportunity for us to buy it back. But I definitely had not navigated these waters at all. So I don't
mhm.
know what the playbook is. I don't know what I don't know. But I was able to tap a mentor, of mine
Really?
that had gone through several acquisitions as a CEO, and not all of them were super smooth. So like there was definitely some tactical playbooks that he had to go through. So we tapped him and got him involved, and he helped guide us through it, which was paramount. I don't know if we would have gotten the same outcome otherwise.
That's so cool. And I think it's important. I don't know how you met this mentor, but I see so many people, and I have a sales background as well, but like look at relationships as so transactional. I think we've talked about that in like business partners and employees. And in a second, I want to end by talking a little bit about what you guys do with your customers as well, because I think that you don't look at that relationship as transactional at all.
Yeah.
But that mentor, to finish that point that you had, my guess is I think I see a lot of people severely underestimate like you and I met eating pizza at a conference. You know, there was no necessarily business to be done. There was no sales, there was no anything there, but there's all these value in relationships and the people that you're working with and the people that you're interacting with at conferences, at coffee shops, at wherever it is that you go, that there's reason to nurture these relationships both for you and for them where it's going to become mutually beneficial. Like you didn't know that you were going to need that information until you needed it. And my guess is that person was already in your network. It would have been a lot harder to find that person if you hadn't nurtured that relationship beforehand and get the same kind of advice that you had gotten. So I think it's just an important point to make around mentors and advisors of you don't know, there's not always a point to these relationships that you're building.
Right.
You don't know when they're going to come in handy or what's going to come from them. But if you don't look at your relationships as so transactional, it's pretty crazy what can start to happen in your career and the type of network that all of a sudden that you're building.
You nailed it.
Yeah. Okay, cool. The last thing I want to talk about is I've heard some really cool stories and you can share one of your favorites if you want, but I know that you don't look at you talked about the tank event, but I think there's some other cool things that you guys have done with customers.
Okay, it just it
Sorry, I might have froze
you
for a sec.
completely
If you
went out
want
for that.
to customers at BattlBox in a way that you have definitely gone out of just looking at them as subscribers or purchasers, and you've tapped into people's personal lives and supported them at times where they need that. If you don't mind sharing one of those stories, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, so we don't view our customers as transactional. One, they, you know, LTV wise, they spend a lot of their their disposable income with us. So I think it wouldn't be right to view them just as a transaction when they're making that big of a life decision. Um, so we treat them as like extended family, and we get to know them, and community is a paramount piece of what we do and what we care about, and arguably some of our secret sauce. Um, so yeah, so we have a group of, not all of our active subscribers are in it, but we have a Facebook group with I think maybe 8,000 of them, and they're all just interacting, getting to know each other, and forming relationships. Um, Outside of BattleBox and them, like they're forming relationships with each other, which is, I think, how you know it's working well, right?
Yeah.
When it's continuing to grow in the petri dish, if you will, without you putting stuff from the Q-tip in. I don't know why I went with a science analogy.
I love
The
it.
um, but no, there's so many cool stories. You know, uh we have a budget each month that the CS team, the customer experience team, has, where they're just looking for opportunities where it's just um an opportunity to do something that a friend would do, right? Send a card or send a small gift, or just say something. You know, I think you look at Chewy, pet e-commerce brand. You know, we stole this from them, right? I think it's a best practice that Chewy does. Hello Bello is actually who verbally gave us the idea because they were doing it. Um, but it's the Chewy story is the easiest to tell because everybody knows Chewy or has animals, right? Not everybody
Yeah.
has outdoor adventure gear. But you know, there's a video that went viral, and then they didn't make it go viral. Like they just did it, and it happened to go viral because it was genuine.
Hmm.
it's not a unique one-off situation. Like they do stuff like that. It was a customer that they had the auto ship subscription with Chewy for some products, and their dog had passed away. So they had reached out and said, "Hey, you just renewed this. Um, is there any way just cancel this and refund this? My dog passed away." And Chewy, absolutely, they canceled it. They it had already shipped, but they
Mhm.
refunded it anyway. And they said, when it gets there, just if you can take it to like a shelter or rescue or someplace just to donate it to, um, and you know, you're good to go. Like we refunded you completely. Which I think that alone is pretty cool. But then
Mhm.
they went a step further and they sent a thing of flowers and a note, and multiple Chewy employees had signed it. Like it was real, right? Like their pet
Something
lover.
a friend would do, like you said, yeah.
It's just, yeah, it's the right thing to do. It's what you would do for your family, for your friends. And I think if you treat your customers that way, like it's not only the right thing to do, it's truly mutually beneficial. It helps everybody. It helps the company. Um, it's just the right way to operate.
Oh, well, thanks for sharing that story, and it's cool that that's somewhere that you've drawn inspiration from. Recently at a conference that I was at, the Vault in Miami, Will Guidara, who owns, I'm gonna butcher it, but like one of the top-rated Michelin restaurants in New York, they did a very similar thing. Like they went to Tiffany and they had Tiffany boxes where they then gave you the champagne flute if you got engaged at the restaurant. And he talked about how their food was good, but the thing that really put them at the top of their list were all they had a closet of all like gifts for all these different situations that would happen. And on birthdays and on, anniversaries or when people were getting engaged, there was like protocols in place and things that would happen to like make these events extra special so that they could have, these champagne flutes for the rest of their marriage, for the rest of their lives. And I think that stuff like that really makes a big impact on people.
A
And
100%, and that's another good point. A lot of Michelin rated restaurants, they're doing that.
yeah,
Um, the not that it's real life, but the show The Bear. Have you seen it or at all?
I have seen it. I have.
So
Not all of it, but I've watched it.
you see a little glimpse of it in that when it's like it happens a couple of times, but like one of them is there's a family and they're just talking that they didn't get to go and get a deep dish Chicago pizza. And it's just
Mhm.
mentioned in conversation, and one of the team members hears it. And next thing you know, they're sending a team member to go get one, and then they're bringing it in and making it um sprucing it up a little bit, not just bringing out the pie. But it's like little things like that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a really good. That's the top notch restaurants are all doing that, right? They're listening, they're doing research, on who their clientele is to better understand them and form those connections.
They're
Because I
looking
mean,
at
you're never like your example, like if that happens, like you're talking about that to multiple people. You're telling people the story.
mhm.
Your loyalty to that brand or that restaurant is unmatched.
It's about
Like,
making an impact, I think that the best brands, I mean, to sum it up, is they're looking at people as people. They're not looking at them as customers or clients, and they're making an impact on those people's lives rather than just giving them a service or a product.
right,
And to me, that is like the definition of impact. Is it's something that you want to go tell your friends about. It's a story rather than. He joked like if you don't get a free glass of champagne when you get engaged in a restaurant, you're at the wrong restaurant, which is just like it's true. And so the impact that you're making when you're giving these people
I
these
lost you
stories to
for a
go
second.
tell, I think is very, very cool. I just want to say again, really appreciate you for chatting with me today, John. It's a very cool first interview to get to do with you. And some really good insights that you shared. Is there anything else that you want to share before we sign off?
No, that's everything. Thanks for
Cool.
having me. This was fun.
Yeah, of course.